Hi folks, welcome to your MWIS Winter Planner. This updated on Friday the 30th of December. Heading into the New Year weekend, and the mountains of Scotland are looking pretty wintry. Not too much of any snow cover lower down, but some hard frost to come through this weekend. A typically milder story further south, windy with gales at times for the tops in England and Wales. A generally unsettled week ahead is to be expected once more, but the Scottish mountains likely to stay, with the terrain generally frozen. The general weather patterns are looking like this. For the first week of January, then, we have high pressure, which is over central and southern parts of Europe. Low pressure is over the North Atlantic around Iceland. We're feeding in a relatively mild southwesterly airflow, then, across the southern half of Britain through this time, and it'll stay that way most of the week ahead. But for northern regions, we're sort of a bit back and forth between less cold and colder conditions coming around off the Atlantic. At times, the airflow is then coming towards us from Greenland and especially across Scotland. That will keep the mountain terrain most often below freezing point. It is the sort of pattern, though, that keeps the jet stream very much in play, and that will keep various weather systems swinging through as we go through the week ahead. The trends as we go onwards toward the middle of the month suggest that higher pressure would just be a bit more extensive out into the Atlantic to the west of us, and that would just slow down those milder air masses from getting towards us, instead allowing more typical chillier west by northwesterly air flows to dominate, and that keeping many of the mountains near or below freezing point more of the time, and a sort of pattern that brings us showers of snow and hail coming in at times. Most frequent precipitation on western mountains. Now, there isn't a great deal of confidence in the forecast modelling into the middle of the month. This chart basically suggesting that climatologically average conditions would be likely. In other words, there isn't a signal for lower or higher than average pressure. So not really much we can take from that at this stage. The suggestion of higher pressure, the pinker colours, would be further east over Europe. We might just then hang on to some of the chillier air that will have been around more likely in the second week of January. Let's take you through some of the shorter range details then. This is the freezing level chart, and there's quite a boundary of colder and milder air across the country on Saturday. And that is the milder air over England and Wales, the colder air with much terrain frozen over the Highlands, boundary somewhere over northern England. Now, this might be a bit further north, even into the southern uplands. One or two suggestions have that colder air just that bit further south into the lakes and the Pennines. So here, some of the terrain may be quite icy on higher levels. Any precipitation that falls could well fall as snow for periods over the top, so bear that in mind for the lakes and North Pennines. The situation then, as we go onwards through into New Year's Day, is that colder air is still very much in place across the Highlands. Most terrain is then frozen down to lower slopes, then just a bit higher, with the freezing level around the west coast, around 600 to 700 metres, or maybe a touch higher than that. It may lift for a while toward the central belt, but it soon comes down again with another hard frost overnight into Monday. Still with relatively milder air for England and Wales, but the highest tops may be close to freezing point, and that will be a similar situation into Monday daytime as well. Lowest freezing levels across the Highlands, extensively frozen, somewhat higher for England and Wales, up to around 700 or 800 metres, but icy conditions to be aware of over the higher tops and touch of frost in some of the valleys. Through into the middle of the week, and Tuesday sees something of a rise of freezing level, but might be a complicated situation as a front tries to come in, so the scope some snowfall for a while. Mildest conditions look to be in the middle of the week, as maybe for a time temperatures lift above freezing point towards higher summits Tuesday night into Wednesday. For later in the week, looks as though the chillier air comes back around from the west-northwest, and Scotland at least goes back sub-zero to quite low elevations, whereas England and Wales, it's more confined to the highest tops, but we might get some icy conditions back in the forecast once more on higher terrain. The snow depth situation taking you forwards in 6-hour time intervals, the general story then of lying snow, and pretty extensive over the Highlands, not too much lying on any lower elevations, and it's a bit variable even higher up, but fairly extensive coverage over the high tops. Icy conditions to consider as well. Just noticed there's some snow showing up here over the northern hills in England then, which is just dependent on that north-south boundary of milder and colder air during the day on Saturday. That may just top itself up even overnight as the front comes northwards and runs into that colder air. There's the scope then for some snowfall over the hills in northern England and the southern uplands as we start New Year's Day. That tending to be a transient feature as milder air then pushes back a little bit northwards during the day. There may be some further snowfalls then into the Highlands during Sunday daytime. That is a bit uncertain, but the risk of snow pushing northwards for a spell. There's not too much further accumulation onwards into Monday, but a bit more maybe comes into western Scotland. The extensive lying snow is still there. There may be a further snowfall just topping up things here through Tuesday, and then things just retreat somewhat, although notice there's still a fair amount of snow to be lying across most of Scotland, just thinning out somewhat as the middle of the week goes on. Little, if anything, really for England and Wales. There may be a bit of a dusting in places on some high tops and some icy conditions at times, but the majority of the snow on the mountains is to be found in Scotland. Let's have a look through the synoptic charts then for the days ahead, and a rather complicated situation on New Year's Eve. A tangle of fronts over England and Wales with mild southwesterlies in place here, some rain and low cloud pretty extensive. Gale force winds for Wales and the South Pennines early in the day will tend to ease for a time, but then do be aware they'll strengthen again further into the evening and the night. Extensive gales or severe gales over the mountains heading through towards midnight. Further north across Scotland and northern England, a lull in the wind, most likely all of daylight. That north-south boundary of colder air is across northern England with the scope for that snow as mentioned on the tops. There's some snow across the northern highlands as well around that front, which will tend to weaken with time, but a few showers left behind with some snow or some hail close to the west coast. One or two flurries inland, but for much of the Highlands, a decent hogmanay with some cloud breaks, some brighter skies, but may just be that we're hanging on some mistiness around some of the hills, but many places looking dry. So New Year's Day daytime, it's another complicated one. We are in generally chillier conditions across the mountains, so precipitation that falls in the highlands broadly is snow, a mix of snow, rain and hail over the tops in England and Wales, close to freezing point then on higher terrain. It could be that that precipitation is frequent near to the Irish Sea as fronts are just around and the wind is southwesterly, and the threat of gales, even severe gales over the tops in England and Wales for much of the daytime. Again, Scotland, under a shallower pressure situation, sees mostly light winds, but could just become rather gusty in places. We're really just watching then the extent that snow can push northwards and circulate around in the Highlands. It would be more likely to be focused on east and southeastern regions, less of it further north and west. Monday is likely to bring some of the best conditions overall in the days ahead. Still, maybe some dregs of snow showers and flurries toward the west coast of Scotland, some rain or some sleet at lower elevations. One or two isolated showers elsewhere, but a good amount of dry and bright weather, touch of frost in the morning, and some banks of cloud and mist that could be around at various elevations, but some brighter spells coming through as well. Best of the sunshine typically further towards the east. Fairly light winds overall for most. A reasonable day then, just under a brief ridge of high pressure. Lowering pressure and frontal systems coming back in from the west into the middle of the week, and the risk of some snow and some rain moving in across the hills and mountains. Snow over higher terrain, some rain and sleet lower down, and maybe generally wet around western coastal fringes. There's uncertainty in the forecast. It's likely to be windy and expect precipitation to be fairly widespread, but it may break up for spells during the day. But a further frontal system is not too far behind coming in from the Atlantic, and it's that one that will see a more pronounced rise of temperature and freezing level. There's much uncertainty on how the charts look by the middle of the week, but fair to say that we're looking at westerly weather patterns, areas of low pressure coming through, with fairly windy conditions overall, areas of rain and snow by this stage, mostly confined to higher mountains in Scotland. All the latest information can be found on our website, but for today I shall wish you a very happy new year for when it arrives. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.